Now, with unprecedented potential of growth, a rising middle class and rapid urbanization, Africa offers to the global community unmatched investment opportunities in various sectors, while Mauritius is equally popular among fund managers and investors with its conducive and enabling environment in Africa for private equity funds. Joining us from our studio in Port Louis is Nursi-mulu, Director at Barclays Mauritius. Rishi, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the world knows Mauritius more than anything else for being a fantastic honeymoon destination. Why are we suddenly seeing an increased focus on the island around private equity?
Sure. Thanks very much for allowing me to speak. So what I can tell you is that there is a huge effort that's being undertaken by the public sector, the private sector, the Bank of Mauritius, Stock Exchange of Mauritius, banks like Barclays, to position Mauritius as the hub for investing into Africa. Now, yes, we do have the sand, the sea, the sun. We are a tiny island in the Indian Ocean, but we are part of Africa. And we have all the attributes that are necessary to make Mauritius the hub for investing into Africa. Now, let me talk a bit about those attributes. So number one, we've got a very good regulatory framework, political stability. We've also got a good legal framework where Mauritius combines the common law in the UK with also the French civil code. And of course, we have access to the Privy Council in the UK, which is a first actually for Africa. Also, obviously, the fiscal incentives that Mauritius offers. So we have the largest number of DTAs in Africa amongst our peers. That should say something about using Mauritius as a platform. Also, we do have no exchange controls, no capital gains, and also no withholding taxes. In fact, the World Bank has ranked Mauritius #1 in terms of ease of doing business in Africa. And in fact, this morning, I'm just reading from one of the press releases from the World Economic Forum, has ranked Mauritius as the #1 economic competitive economy in sub-Saharan Africa, overtaking South Africa. So for the first time, an African nation has made it to the top 50 globally, and that happens to be Mauritius. So there is a process of demystifying Mauritius away from the traditional sort of the honeymoon destination. So hopefully soon, people, when they think of Mauritius, they won't see just, beach holiday, but they will also think invest in Africa, and we can already see the trend happening.
Of course, Rishi, I mean, I completely concur with you, having seen that report from the World Economic Forum, but that still means that Mauritius comes up against really strong competitors when we position it as a gateway into Africa, and particularly not only looking at South Africa, but at Kenya in East Africa, and maybe even Nigeria when we go over to the west. So when we look at Mauritius as a potential gateway to Africa, how is this rather small island leveraging on its stability and regulations to make sure that it actually attracts the lion's share of investments away from the Kenyans, the South Africans, and the Nigerians?
I think to answer that question, I mean, I see two questions really in what you've just said. The first one is how can Mauritius sort of demonstrate political stability, etc. Well, in fact, it has already happened. That's our history. And if you look at, the last 30 years or so in Mauritius, there hasn't been, civil unrest or political unrest. So, in fact, a lot of the investors have been comfortable in coming into Mauritius, planting themselves here for their investments into India. So we have the track record that's already in the way. Now, the second part of the question I would think is, how do we differentiate ourselves, Mauritius, from the competitors such as, like you mentioned, South Africa, and that's mainly for African competitors, but also for offshore jurisdictions that offer offshore banking. So, for example, Singapore or Dubai. So let's tackle the first one, so South Africa. The main disadvantage, I suppose, of using South Africa is the issue of exchange controls, which Mauritius is absolutely free from. The second advantage, I would think, of using Mauritius over South Africa is the fact that more and more, we see PE funds want to list, and that's because they become more attractive, because they become more compliant with regulations, etc. So it's a good signal to institutional investors globally.
Rishi?
Yes?
Very quickly, if you can just give me an indication of what are the key trends around private equity that we're seeing being thrown up, not only in Mauritius, but the broader region, and what should we be expecting in terms of activity around private equity in that regard?
Okay, the key trends I would think is, well, if you compare what the PE sector was in Africa 10 years ago, it was mainly dominated by funds managed out of the UK, out of the US, whereas now you see a lot of interest coming from the likes of Asia. So we see India, China, South Korea, even Japan wanting to go into Africa. So that's number one trend. The second trend, I would say, is the sectors, in terms of sectors. So previously, there was this concept of let's just invest generally into Africa. Whereas now, because of the extent of the investment, we're seeing funds being very specific on sectors. And so we have real estate funds being dedicated to Africa that are listed, etc. The third thing I would say is that we're seeing a lot of PE funds wanting to list. And I mentioned that previously. It offers, I suppose, some comfort to investors globally about, being regulated, etc. And so Mauritius plays a significant role in that, because the stock exchange in Mauritius, where you can list, is actually the only exchange in Africa that can offer listing, trading, settlement in multi-currencies.